This video was brought to you by my loyal patrons. Pledge today and receive exclusive perks. Link in the description. Hello everyone, and welcome back to the Railway. It has been a hot minute since we were last here. 2023 was a crazy year for me, or I didn't get as much progress to the layout done as I had hoped for. But I'll get into all that later. Many of you have asked over the months when part 2 would be coming out. Well, I didn't want to make a part 2 until I had enough done to the layout to warrant a lengthy video. Recently though, I've made some great progress on it, and I think now is as good a time as any to fill you all in on what's been happening. We are going to pick up right where we left off from part 1. So before we start, I recommend going back and watching part 1 first, so you're not lost here. We good? Okay, cool. Let's begin. Last time we covered laying the track, ballasting, setting up the turntable, and the station setup. So let's hop over to the west side of the board and now talk about the shed yard. The main shed yard has transformed quite a bit since you all last saw it. In real life, shed yards were always coated with soot and grime from steam engines, so I wanted my yard to reflect that. Before ballasting, I painted all the exposed wood beside the tracks with a coat of matte black paint, and then when dry, I ballasted all the tracks, filling in all the exposed parts. For this, I used a black fine ballast. You can now see a clear difference between the running lines and the area where the steam engines are stored. The more open areas between tracks I painted a dark gray, to represent areas for road or spaces where vehicles and trackside accessories would be placed. Now for the ground cover. The small exposed spaces are going to be covered up with grass to give our yard a little greenery. This was done by painting those exposed bits with brown paint, and while the paint was still wet, I sprinkled some green ground turf right on top of it. When the paint dries, the turf will be stuck in place. No need for glue. Before painting though, I did some tests with different browns to see how that affected the shade of green. Even though the brown would be covered entirely by the green, the base color does still show through in parts, and that affects the color. I settled on a milk chocolatey sort of brown. With all the turf down, the area is really starting to take shape. It's starting to look like a real yard now, and not just some model train tracks on a baseboard. I added a few bushes here and there, and voila, we're done. While I was on a roll, I decided to paint this exposed part between the retaining walls and the tracks brown as well, though I haven't completely decided what I want to do here yet, so I'm yet to place any turf down until I make a decision. I was thinking this would be the perfect place for a signal box, but that's greatly changed since, and you'll all see why soon. With all this new ground, it was time to start adding some details. I purchased several buildings to give the yard a little flair. A water standpipe between the berths at the shed, a big water storage tower from Hornby in this open area so the standpipe has a place to get water from, a little signal box for the yard, and a coal stage for the siding adjacent to the sheds, so the engines can go coal up before heading out to collect their trains. I also started having a little fun with the road vehicles. With a road so close to a running line, I felt some sort of separation was needed. So I bought these Great Western line-side wire fences from Ratio to create a sort of barrier between yard and running line, just like there would be in real life. Using a screwdriver, I drilled tiny holes in the board outlining the road, measuring the space between them with a ruler as I went. Now this is pretty unorthodox and probably not what Ratio recommends you do, but whatever. This way works for me. I put super glue in each hole and then slid each fence post into place. Let them dry overnight, and by next morning, they were rock hard. Then I pulled the wires tight around the fence poles, using putty at each end to hold them all in place. Dabbed each post with more super glue, and waited till they were rock hard. When dry, I snipped off the excess wire and painted the whole fencing in a matte black. This fence is now super solid and will not move. And now we have a nice separation of the running line and the yard area. Even something as simple as a fence gives this area so much more life. In my spare time, I also built this plastic coaling tower kit by Ratio to replace the coal stage on the siding adjacent to the sheds. I was originally planning on spray painting this in a matte gray and weathering it, but I don't know, I kinda like that oxide red. What do you all think? And that was the last thing I did to the layout before, well, all of 2023 happened. Because right after this, my original YouTube channel got taken down, and I had to rebuild everything from the ground up on this one. Then I got engaged to my girlfriend, and we've been planning a wedding. And then I got approved for a house loan, and got a house. And the last few months have been an ongoing process of moving and setting up stuff and doing house projects like painting rooms. Needless to say, 2023 has been a very busy year, with not a lot of time to work on model trains. A new house meant the layout would have to be moved, and it's a good thing that I planned for this. The layout is all on a board simply laying atop some card tables. I removed all the buildings and scenery until it was basically tracks and not much else. We strenuously packed the board up in the moving truck and phew, she survived the move with not a scratch on her. With all this new space and a house to run trains, I saw this as an opportunity to expand the layout and make a proper train room. So this part doesn't have much to do with the layout itself, and more so the room it's now in. My grand plan is to convert my garage into a man cave, a train-themed man cave. And that means it needed some prettying up. Before I could do anything to the layout, I needed to do the necessities to the garage. First things first, the walls needed to be painted. Before being painted, a lot of things had to come down off the walls, and holes had to be filled. I went to work covering all the holes in the wall with putty, and then power sanding them flat when dry. Power sanding creates a lot of dust, so I covered the layout with a plastic tarp to protect it. Always wear protection when power sanding, kids. You don't want to breathe that stuff in. When that was finished, it was time for painting. I went with a light gray because gray is a neutral color that pretty much goes with everything. Already looking so much better. Next step was the floor. I got some gym floor padding. You know, those floor pads that look like giant puzzle pieces. I laid all this down, cutting it to size, so I wouldn't be walking on cold, hard concrete when out here. It feels nice on the feet, and it makes the place look less like a garage. The room is still in a very unfinished state, with a lot of junk in it that still needs to be moved into the house or taken to Goodwill. But that's a chore for another day. The necessities were done, and the room is now in a place where I can start working on the layout again. I saw this as a chance to expand the layout into something bigger, into more of a dream layout with more fun operations. I did not want to start from scratch again after putting so much time into the layout that I had already created, so I decided to work with what I had and build off of it. Here is what I came up with. So first off, I knew that if I was ever going to expand this, the first thing I would add is a giant terminus station. Ever since I was a kid, I dreamed of having a giant Knapford-like canopy station on a layout, but I never ever had room for one. Now, I finally do. I drew up some track plans. The entrance to the station yard would be via a switch here from the outer loop. This branches out into an array of points that will form a 5-platform station. The first 4 platforms all have escape points at each end, so engines can uncouple from their trains and run around them. Platform 5, the bay platform, will be for goods, complete with a little goods shack at the end. At the moment, I plan to use Bachmann's upcoming Somerset and Dorset railway station building for this. Below the station is an array of sidings, nice long ones that I can store coaches and goods trains on. And on the west side of the yard, a little shed for the station's pilot engine, because every big station needs its own pilot engine. For this, I will likely use the Bachmann-Thomas resin engine shed. At first, adding this station extension was the only expansion that I had planned for. But I quickly realized that I would need some way to flip trains' directions. Cause God, stopping trains on the outer loop to reverse them into the station would get annoying real fast. Imagine what a nightmare it would be trying to navigate coaches all around those points. So I came to the conclusion that I would need a reverse loop. The reverse loop will be atop a square board on the other side of the main board. Trains can exit the outer line onto this balloon loop to flip directions and travel back into the station in the opposite direction they departed from, all while going forwards. This will take some electrical work that I will need to familiarize myself with, as I know balloon loops are kind of a nightmare when it comes to wiring. Ideally, I plan to put a ruined castle on a hill in the center here, to give this very suburban layout some green countryside. I plan to place a cutoff board right in the middle to have a completely new style of scenery on the other side. I haven't fully settled on anything yet, but I was thinking a quiet, sleepy harbor. Something akin to the fishing village in Thomas. That way, on this one layout, we get giant metropolitan city center with the big station, a suburban town with a junction station, some green English countryside, and some seaside action, all in one. After mulling over the plan a bit, I built the layout in Railmodeler Pro, just as I did before, to get a more concrete idea of just how large this was going to have to be and what track pieces would be needed. So that is what you're seeing now. The station will need a 3x8 foot board, and the reverse loop a 4x4 board. I plan to give each expansion its own power source. The whole station yard will run on one controller, and the reverse loop on another. All the tracks pertaining to their own power source are depicted here in their own color, so it's not confusing. With all the expansions explained, let me now walk you through what would be the ideal main operation of this layout. An engine exits the shed yard, and then backs down onto its train waiting at platform 2. The train leaves the big station, exits the yard, passing through the junction and enters the main loop. It does a few rounds of the loop before needing to flip directions. The train is sent off the main line onto the reverse loop. It disappears behind the cutoff board, travels a full 180, re-entering the main line in the opposite direction. Maybe do a couple more rounds of the main loop, and then enters the station yard in the opposite direction it left in. The engine leaves the coaches at the same platform 2, and uses the escape points to run round its train, reversing onto the turntable. It spins round, and then moves off the turntable and backs down onto the train, ready to do the whole thing again. All the while, we can have another train on the inner loop running at all times, separate from everything. Or, I can change it up and have 3 different trains all running at once on their own loops, while a switcher independently shunts wagons in the station yard. So many possibilities. This is the type of layout I dreamed about having as a kid. Something with interactivity from the user throughout the whole journey. Turning a train on to watch it run loops is fun and all, but it admittedly gets a little monotonous after a while. The time to expand is upon us. And for that, we'll need to build some proper tables. Now, I always planned at some point to build a proper structured table for the layout to rest on. The layout is on particle board, and without any sort of proper frame underneath to hold it, it will start to bow over time. My parents very kindly got me a table saw for my birthday, and I wasted no time buying wood to put it to use. I originally drew plans to make it all one giant solid L-shaped frame. But after consulting some friends' opinions, I realized making each its own module would be much smarter. That way I can take them apart for whenever I move again, or if I need to remove them for some reason. After some careful cutting and drilling, all the tables are built, with support beams across the middle to keep the boards from bowing over time. The largest, a 4x8 foot one for the main board, then a 3x8 one for the station, and a small 4x4 for the reverse loop. I screwed the layout board on top of the new frame, and voila! Here is your first look at the new layout setup. So much more space now. In the corner where the two big boards meet, I installed a shelf to store all the controllers. I plan to have 4 controllers eventually, so I made sure to leave room. I am also an idiot. I totally forgot to put up the backdrop on the wall before pushing the tables into place, so I had to pull them out, then put up the backdrop, and push them all back into place. Fortunately, I can reach over the boards to put new backdrops up on the rest of the wall, but it's that corner spot that's just a bit too hard to reach. I spent some time rewiring everything, making sure to keep all the wires neat and organized. After a thorough track cleaning session, everything's all up and powered. So let's have ourselves a little running session. So as far as scenery goes, this is where my layout stands as of right now. It's not hugely different from the last time you saw it, but it is now in a position to move forward full steam ahead on it. Next steps for me are going to be placing a bulk order of track to build the extensions. I'd also like to get some platforms for the canopy station, build some more retaining walls, and extend those backdrops. Quite a lot to do, and I cannot wait to get started. Stay tuned for more. Thanks again, everyone, for tuning into this new installment of Tugs Trains. I know you all want to see more modeling content, and I want to make more. They are just unfortunately a big time commitment, and hard to keep putting out consistently when other big life stuff is happening. I'm hoping that I'll have a lot more to show you all in 2024. Now that I have the tables down, I can jump right into laying more track and building permanent scenery. I also think it's high time I update some of my older Tugs Trains models I'm not super happy with. Edward's been at the top of the list forever. I'd love to make him more accurate to how he's described in the Railway series. Would also love to redo Percy at some point, give him a more reliable chassis at the very least. I also want to redo the paint on Spencer too. The brushstrokes are too visible for me. All stuff to think about next year. Who knows what next year will bring? Guess we'll just have to wait and see. I keep bringing up that Tugs project I'm working on for the Lucky Tug, and I'm happy to say that it is now in the completion stages. Just some little edits here and there I have to finish, but this thing is about 95% done. Without giving anything away, this project is a multi-video series, and at the moment I'm thinking of posting the first video on New Year's Day, with the rest following day by day. I'm still not 100% sure about that, but I will make an announcement here when it's out so you all know. Don't worry, Tugs fans, new content's a-coming. And that's about all from me, folks. I'm hoping to have another video out before the new year, but if I don't, then I wish you all a happy holiday and a happy new year. Thanks to my patrons as always for your support. See you all in the next one, folks. Bye-bye.